You sure you want to live stream this? I think it's 56. Yeah. Rajovacha Shrutam Anvikshitam Brahman Bhagavan Yad Apashata Naitaj Janantyupadhyaya Kim na bruyur vidur yadi Shrutam Anvikshitam Brahman Bhagavan Yad Apashata Naitaj Janantyupadhyaya Kim na bruyur vidur yadi Shrutam Anvikshitam Brahman Bhagavan Yad Apashata Naitaj Janantyupadhyaya Kim na bruyur vidur yadi. Word for word translation says, Rajovacha, the king said, that's King Prachinabarhi. Shrutam was heard, and Vikshitam was considered, Brahman, O Brahmana. That's Narada Muni. Bhagavan, the most powerful. Yet, which, Abhashata, you have spoken. Na, not, eta, this. Jananti, do know. Upadhyayaha, the teachers of fruitive activities. Kim, why? Na bruyuhu, they did not instruct. Viduhu, they understood. Yadi, if. King Prachinabarhi is going to throw down the gauntlet and question the authority of those he has heard from thus far. Translation says, the king replied, my dear Brahmana, whatever you have said, I have heard with great attention, and considering all of it, have come to the conclusion that the acharyas, teachers, who engaged me in fruitive activity, did not know this confidential knowledge. If they were aware of it, why did they not explain it to me? Purport. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Actually, the so-called teachers or leaders of material society do not really know the goal of life. There you go. If you had some doubts, Prabhupada's clarifying it now for the record. Neither Biden, nor Putin, nor anybody else who's leading material society really knows the goal of life. It's now explicitly clear. They are described in Bhagavad Gita as Maya Parita Jnana. So you probably remember this verse from Bhagavad Gita. It means one whose knowledge, one's jnana, is stolen by illusion, by the illusory energy. So they have some intelligence, they have some knowledge, some ability, some capacity, but Maya induces them to misuse it in all sorts of wild and crazy ways. They are described in Bhagavad Gita as Maya Parita Jnana. They appear to be very learned scholars, but actually the influence of the illusory energy has taken away their knowledge. Real knowledge means, who knows? Searching out Krishna, Vedaishya Sarvayar Aham Eva Vedya. All Vedic knowledge is meant for searching out Krishna, because Krishna is the origin of everything. Janmaryasya. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Aham Adir Hidevanam, I'm the source of the demigods. Thus, Krishna is the origin and beginning of all demigods, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and all others. The Vedic ritualistic ceremonies are concerned with satisfying different demigods, but unless one is very advanced, he cannot understand that the original personality is Sri Krishna. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. After hearing the instructions of Narada, King Barhishman came to his senses. The real goal of life is to attain devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The king therefore decided to reject the so-called priestly orders that simply engage their followers in the ritualistic ceremonies without giving effective instructions about the goal of life. At the present moment, the churches, temples, and mosques all over the world are not attracting people because foolish priests cannot elevate their followers to the platform of knowledge. Wow. It's a harsh but true criticism. There's statistics to back that up too. Not being aware of the real goal of life, they simply keep their congregations in ignorance. Consequently, those who are well educated have become uninterested in the ritualistic ceremonies. At the same time, they are not benefited with real knowledge. This Krishna consciousness movement is therefore very important for the enlightenment of all classes. Following in the footsteps of Maharaj, what does he mean by all classes? Obviously, classism isn't so popular these days, but it would seem that Prabhupada's implying that this Krishna consciousness movement is meant for the enlightenment of both the people who are congregation members and the priests. Even the priests who are trying to benefit others, but who are lacking in real knowledge, should be benefited by the Krishna consciousness movement. Following in the footsteps of Maharaj Barhishman, everyone should take advantage of this Krishna consciousness movement and abandon the stereotyped ritualistic ceremonies that go under the garb of so many religions. That will be a controversial talking point. The Goswami, so we're meant to abandon, we're supposed to take advantage of the Krishna consciousness movement and abandon the stereotyped ritualistic ceremonies that go under the garb of so many religions. The Goswamis from the very beginning differed from the priestly class that was engaged in ritualistic ceremonies. Indeed, Srila Sanatana Goswami compiled his Hari Bhakti Vilasa for the guidance of the Vaishnavas. The Vaishnavas, not caring for the lifeless activities of the priestly classes, take to full Krishna consciousness and become perfect in this very life. That is described in the previous verse as Paramahamsa Sharanam, taking shelter of the Paramahamsa, the liberated soul, and becoming successful in this life. Ooh, interesting points from His Divine Grace. The Prabhupada ki jai. Om Gyana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamahyam Tarati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shrita Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shcha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Param Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Shcha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhana Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, King Barhishman, also known as Prachina Barhi, is saying to Narada Muni, he's heard all this explanation from Narada Muni and saying, hey, this is different from what I've heard from other teachers, the other priests who tried to engage me in ritualistic activities. They didn't talk about this transcendental knowledge about the nature of the self and the super self, Krishna. Why didn't they explain it to me? His frustration is valid and just. And We should all be frustrated if we spent some time doing that. I myself was raised as a good young Catholic. My mommy put me in Catholic school. And I think it was the last of the classes to be legally beaten by the nuns. I don't know if they do that anymore, not in America. They had that yardstick, you know, it's like 3 feet long. And if you were not a good little boy, then you had to put your hands on the desk like this, and the nuns would try to hit all 10 of your knuckles with the yardstick. And I was not taught confidential knowledge about the nature of the soul and the super soul and Bhagavan Krishna. Rather, there's a lot of engagement in ritualistic activities. Of course, ritualistic ceremonies and activities have their value. Hold on a second. Let's see what Krishna says about it. Certainly, ritualistic ceremonies, they have some value. To engage people who are attached to materialistic things in activities which will gradually elevate them. But higher than the ritualistic activities is transcendental knowledge. Transcendental knowledge means understanding Krishna as the origin of everything. And that's what's actually meant to be accomplished in all religious activity. And that is the purpose of all the scripture. Vedaischa sarvair aham eva vedya, is to understand Krishna, God, the origin of everything. If other ritualistic activities are just helping one to purify their existence, reduce some of the habits of sinful life, you know, that's great. That's great. But ultimately, we must come to the point of transcendental knowledge. Krishna talks about this, not just me yapping. Krishna talks about it in chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, which is a great little book. Highly recommend it to everybody. And in the middle part of chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about different types of sacrifice that people do, different types of activities. He says that some, you know, they're controlling their breath. Some worship the demigods by offering sacrifices in the fire. Some worship the Supreme by offering sacrifices in the fire of Brahman. Some, the brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control. The brahmacharis have to be hearing and chanting all the time. Jiva Pandit, always hearing. Others, the regulated householders, sacrifice the objects of the senses in the fire of the senses. It sounds a lot nicer, huh? But even that has to be regulated and accompanied by so much ritual. You can't just have sex. You're meant to perform a ritual that goes with it. Then he says, others achieve self-realization by controlling the mind and the senses and the breath of life. They do pranayama. Some sacrifice their possessions. Others perform austerities. Some perform the practice of yoga, of eightfold mysticism. Others studying the Vedas. Some controlling the incoming and outgoing breath. Some curtail the eating process. All these different types of sacrifice or ritual is there. But then Krishna says, Shrayan Dravya Mayad Yajyag Yagyaj Jnana Yagya Parantapa. But the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Pritha, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. And that's what Prachinavari is getting at here. Like, I was engaged in so much ritualistic activity by my teachers, by the priests. I was dressed the right way. I walked the walk. I talked the talk. gave my donations, my tithing. We still have tithings in the churches. Imagine they got a lot of tithings. Somebody's got to pay for all these politicians. So I walked the walk and I talked the talk and I gave my tithings. I did all the rituals, but it didn't culminate in transcendental knowledge, is what Maharaj Prachinapari is saying. It didn't culminate in the knowledge that you're explaining to me now, Narada Muni. But Krishna is saying that is really the purpose. If you're doing any ritual, it must culminate. For all sacrifice of work, every yajna must culminate in transcendental knowledge. Otherwise, we have been misled and distracted, and missed out. So let's not hold a grudge for those of us who are Hare Krishna converts. Let's not hold a grudge that whatever, previous spiritual or religious community we were involved in probably didn't give us transcendental knowledge about Krishna as the origin of everything, about the nature of the soul beyond the body, about the enemies of the mind and all that incredible stuff. They probably just engaged us in ritual and probably just to pad their pockets. I say probably because, it's Kali Yuga. Let's just admit it. Everybody's out to gain a buck, including many of the churches, temples, mosques of the world, unfortunately. And oftentimes that's why an emphasis is kept on ritual, is so that the priestly class can maintain a steady income stream, passive income stream. Well, for them, often it's very active. If you maintain a focus on ritualistic activity, then it necessitates a specialization, necessitates that some people must be specialists in the ritual, in the sacrifice, in the ceremony, whatever. And those specialists, of course, are at liberty to, at their discretion, exploit their exclusive access to the rituals for profit. And unfortunately, that has been the case for millennia. Catholic Church went through that period of indulgences, wherein if you committed some sin, you had to atone by literally paying money, just straight up. Here's a certain amount of money, and it will absolve you of a certain amount of sin. Of course, for a long time also, they kept the Bible in Latin exclusively so that common people could not read it. The big reason why Lutheranism, the original Martin Luther, was so controversial in his protest against the Catholic Church is that he translated it from Latin into like the village languages of Germany, so that normal people can read it and go, oh, hold on a second. Hold on a second. These priests are kind of like taking advantage of us here. So obviously the Catholic Church was very upset with him about that, such that they declared war. And, back those days, you could just like straight up kill people if they disagreed with you theologically. There's a really fascinating story about how some Lutherans, not Martin Luther himself, but other Lutherans, like holed up in this one village. And then they were under siege from whatever army was representing the Catholic Church. And it was like really brutal and gruesome sort of war going on. The church finally got in and captured the leaders of this Lutheran movement there. And the torture they would do to people, like to set an example to others, they would torture these Lutherans. It was really gruesome. It involved, of course, peeling off someone's skin, which wouldn't really kill them. And then they would put them in a cage and like hang them from one of the top spires of the church so everybody could watch them suffer and die. And there are some churches in Germany that still has, no, not some, that one village where that happened, that one church still remains, and they kept the cages there. You can still go and see it. kind of the history lesson about the brutality that can be the result. I'm not saying this is always the case in whatever church you went to as a kid is like this, but I'm saying that is the potential when there's such a exclusive focus on the ritualism and ceremonialism of a religious tradition, such that it becomes a means of control of the population, because any ritual requires a specialist, one who has exclusive knowledge about how to do it, and everybody else is kind of at their whim. So unfortunately, that has happened time and time again in Kali Yuga. It has not yet happened to our beloved International Society of Krishna Consciousness, not just because we're better than everybody, but because we have a unique asset in the form of Srila Prabhupada's books. And Prabhupada's transcendental knowledge is beyond ritualism, ceremonialism, and it protects us from that downfall, which is very common for people. We shouldn't take it for granted. We have very, very little ritual, actually. I mean, of course, you can go to some temples in India if you want to be with some of those types who are really into like doing every ritualistic thing. You can. But for the most part, for most of the members of ISKCON, we are really protected from that. We have one significant ritual, that is to chant the holy names of the Lord every day. It's so simple, it's so profound, and it's so effective. And to be honest, we don't need a lot of the other stuff. Of course, if one likes and one has the capacity, they can apply a lot of ritual in their life, especially if you're involved in worshiping the deities at home or in the temple. You can have a lot of ritual and ceremony. And, you know, for many, it's a great way to also be Krishna conscious. It's like mantras that you chant even when you're tying your kopins. I don't know if anybody here still wears kopins. But if you do, you know, there's a mantra for that. And everything that some of these people do, there's a meditation, there's a mantra, there's a habit, and that way to always maintain a remembrance of Krishna. But for most of us, that's totally unnecessary. And we're very fortunate for that, because Srila Prabhupada has given us such a clear focus on Sankirtana, just hearing and chanting about Krishna. It surpasses all of that. And that's what Maharaj Prachina Barhi is getting at here. He's saying, wow, Narada Muni, I've heard all this incredible knowledge from you. It's very different from what the other teachers have told me. They engaged me in fruitive activity and did not give me confidential knowledge about the soul and the Supreme Soul, Krishna. So we're very fortunate that our focus is on that. We go straight to the transcendental knowledge and straight to the Bhakti Bhava activity of chanting Krishna's names. So therefore, Prabhupada says, following in the footsteps of Maharaj Barhishman, this is Prabhupada saying this, His Divine Grace. Everyone should take advantage of this Krishna consciousness movement. This is Prabhupada saying it, it's not me. Not anybody else, it's Prabhupada. Everyone should take advantage of this Krishna consciousness movement and abandon the stereotyped ritualistic ceremonies that go under the garb of so many religions. So, you know, sometimes it's all right to ask ourselves, do we have stereotyped ritualistic ceremonies also? You know, about a decade ago, there was real juicy sort of debate, conflict going on between some representatives of a more conservative and traditional approach to Krishna consciousness and more liberal and adaptive approach to Krishna consciousness. The debate was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to watch. And I don't know if it was really resolved. Everyone's kind of chosen their sides, but it's wonderful that in ISKCON we have variety of application of Krishna consciousness. I think it's one of our strengths and one of our assets. I think the idea that everyone's going to be like perfectly uniform in their practice and application is a pipe dream. better we embrace our variety. So, of course, some were advocating for abandoning all sorts of stereotyped ritualistic ceremony, particularly stuff that had a lot of ethnic, Indian-like traditions, particular style of dress and food. Some were claiming that these are stereotyped and ritualistic. We don't need to be doing any of that. It can all be more Western, especially when preaching in Western countries. And of course, others maintain that those traditions are very important and that we have to define a clear culture in opposition to the materialistic culture of the modern world. Both have their merits, of course. But what's most important, as described by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita in that verse that I just read, is that we must have transcendental knowledge, the nature of the soul and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada says several times in this purport, transcendental knowledge means knowing Krishna as the origin. He says this word, origin. So whatever spiritual culture we have that has that effect, then it is good. Whether that spiritual culture is a very liberal one or a very traditional one, as long as the effect is knowing Krishna as the origin of everything and that we are his servants, then that culture is good. Both are possible. As His Grace Dhruva Maharaj Prabhu would say, both things are there. He's the master of Achintya Bheda Veda. Both things are there. So King Prachinapari, that's what he's getting at. Now I understand. It's not about fruitive activity. It's about confidential knowledge. Confidential knowledge means knowing Krishna as the origin of everything. You don't really know something unless you know its origin. If you just know one brief instance of a thing, it's not very complete knowledge. Like our body. We know one brief instance of ourself in this body, and that's not complete knowledge. I'm here for 60, 70, 80 years at best. We think this is me. It's just one brief instance. What is your origin? If you don't know the origin, you don't know the complete picture. You don't have full knowledge. That's why humanity has always sought to understand their origins. Some ambitious speculators claim that our origin is the mud. But at least, I don't want to get into it now because Kalaswarupa Prabhu did a nice job bashing evolution theory a little while ago. I'd love a turn too, if the purport is relevant. I'd also love a turn to do some evolution bashing. But at least we should recognize that it's intelligent to search for your origin. We want to know, what is the origin of humanity? What is the origin of a life? Just their speculations are pretty wild. The latest is that, some sort of comet. What is it? They have this term now for it, that the Earth planet was seeded with life from a comet from another place, which of course just kind of regresses the problem. Now you have to explain how life evolved on some other planet. Or some people claim that there's like these tide pools that would like fill up with water and then evaporate, and somehow the place where the water is evaporating caused some sort of magical organic compounds to create. Of course, none of that's been demonstrated in any experiment or laboratory. Born from the mud or from space rocks or whatever. 10 years from now, they'll have another idea. But at least the materialists, some of them, want to know, what is the origin? That's intelligent. That's real knowledge. Try to know, what is the origin of a thing? If you buy a product these days, now it is so important for us to be conscientious consumers and to consider, what is its origin? We cannot take for granted anymore that whatever you find, panspermia. Yes, thank you, Tarika Prabhu. Panspermia is the idea that the sperm or the seed of life must have come from some other place in the universe, which is just avoiding the debate. Pretty stupid. Anyway, so we need to know the origin of something to have real knowledge. We have to be conscientious consumers these days. You cannot just take for granted that whatever product you find at Walmart is good. We have to know, what is the origin? Where was it made? Or, what quality materials? Who made it? Was it slave labor? Statistically, probably. And if we ignore the origin of a thing, then it's ignorance. It's literally ignorance. We want to ignore the origin of something just because it's convenient, it's cheap, it's financially expedient, it's useful, it's utilitarian, to ignore the origin of something. But real knowledge means to know, what is the origin? What is the origin of myself? It's not just this brief instance, this flash in the pan called Yasodev Das. The origin is something so much greater. And similarly, this whole world has as its origin the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, Prabhupada refers to this first verse, the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, and also the first verse of the Vedanta Sutra, Janmadhyasya Yataha. Such an important philosophical concept for us to understand. Janmadhyasya Yataha. I bring this up in preaching programs all the time. It really hits people hard. That by definition, the absolute truth, the supreme, is that from which everything originates. Janmadhyasya Yataha. Whatever we know to be in the effect must exist in the cause. And therefore, the nature of that supreme cause must be a person, the personality of Godhead, Krishna. We know that within the effect, this material world, the most attractive and most valuable and most important thing is the loving relationships that we share with others. There's nothing that we would exchange if it meant never having a relationship with another person again. That's the most valuable, most attractive, and most important thing. And it must exist in the origin as well. This is a logical argument for the personality of Godhead Krishna. It must exist in the origin. So I bring this up a lot in different programs, and people really get it. It's a very logical, clear, precise statement. The origin must include everything that we understand and perceive in this world as well. So that is real knowledge, to know the origin of something, and the origin of everything is Krishna. And whatever sort of leaders of society who are not referring to the origin are in ignorance and promoting ignorance. Sorry, whoever you voted for is wrong. People, there's like such a polarity in America right now, really all over the world. A lot more polarity, and people are, no, you voted for that one, no, you voted for that one. Turns out you're all wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't vote. As Devamrita Swami did imply that we should probably, in most cases, continue to vote. But of course, we are most concerned with Krishna's enterprises. We do not expect any so-called teachers or leaders of material society to really know the goal of life. They're all in ignorance of the origin. Even those who claim to be theistic and pious, of course, in America, no one has ever been elected who was not Christian. To president, to the post of president. You have to say that to be elected. You cannot not be Christian and be elected as president in America. But even those who claim to have some alignment with a religious faith, they're not referring to the origin of everything. They're referring to public sentiment at best and private interests in reality. That's the origin. The origin is who's paying me the most. Even in our beloved disunited states of America. It's now just catching up with the rest of the world, and all the politicians are just paid actors. So we should be concerned with those teachers who really know the origin of everything. And who does better than that than His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada? He never misses an opportunity to refer to the origin of everything, Sri Krishna. Never misses an opportunity. So that's real knowledge. Hare Krishna. I guess we'll just finish there, because if I understand correctly, The Guru Puja begins in a mere 3 minutes. If anyone has any comments or retorts, additions or subtractions, multiplications or divisions, you may correct me. And if not, then I say thank you, dear devotees, for getting up bright and early on a Saturday morning when you could be resting. Thanks for tolerating my spiel. All right.
I'll throw this out there.
Oh, yes, Tarek.
Small, quick contribution.
Throw it, please.
We don't have time for a whole discussion, but this is quick. Regarding voting, Prabhupada stated on numerous occasions that he never once voted in his entire life. And the reason he gave was that the candidates were always rascals. And on principle, he refused to vote for a rascal. Nowadays, devotees will sometimes say, well, this one or that one is the lesser evil. And you can debate endlessly, who actually is more evil and who is less evil. But Srila Prabhupada rejected everyone uniformly. They're all rascals. And as far as he was concerned, voting was absolutely pointless. He explained that the society is a society of cats. Hogs, dogs, camels, and
asses.
Right. And they're in the majority. So, because our numbers are relatively small. So what good is your vote? They're going to vote for whomever. Some rascal will take office, and your vote will have been a waste of time. So he refused to vote. Anyway, that's my contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you for an engaging and very nice class. Oh, and if you have the mantra for Copen, I'd be interested to see that.
I don't have the mantra. I'm sorry.
Because I am still a devout wearer of Copen, and wow. I cannot imagine how anyone could do otherwise. The benefits of Copen are so many, and the absence of Copen is hellish. So, oh yes.
Hare Krishna.
All right, Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Taraka Prabhu, you're so good at encouraging us to do better, but also in a humorous way. Yes, Copens do have a lot of value, and I encourage all brahmacharis to wear your Copens extra tight. Some of us are no longer so austere and capable of being so austere. Leela Kishori Mataji, would you like to say something?
Hare Krishna, good morning. Thank you for a wonderful class. Some of the points that you made, particularly to keep it short, on tithing. And I think that we should be very careful when we look at these translations, because stereotypical means one thing, but we need to know that there are people practicing other religions who are true bhaktas. Teresa of Avila was a true bhakta, and she was a Catholic. Tithing in its true sense, if you have realization, is about knowing that all things come from and belong to Krishna. And so you put them all together, your first fruits, so that everyone equally can partake and no one has to do without. Now, that's not what became of it, but in its true form, that's what it is. Jews chant 72 names of God, Muslims 108. So there's no mistake in these numbers. It all comes down to 9, right? And when you know that knowledge, then you can accept that there are people on all paths. And that's also in Bhagavad Gita. Basically, it says all roads lead to Rome. Krishna says it's all coming back to me. It may take you a whole lot longer than some people, but you will get back to me, in time. So I think that we really need to know that, be very careful when we discuss these things, not to feel superior to them and not to think that people cannot become realized if they have an open heart to Krishna when they're practicing these rituals, because these rituals, in their highest sense, are meant to open the eyes, are meant to open the hearts, are meant to make people want to seek God more. They're not meant to be done. And wasn't this what Jesus said when he said, "You become so addicted to the traditions of men, you've forgotten that it's all about getting back to God." So I just wanted to bring that up so that we don't, because it can be it's a slippery slope. It can be very easy to become self-satisfied and feel like, yes, this is this great confidential knowledge, confidential in the sense that we have it and nobody else does. And that is not, I think, the essence and the reason for Krishna consciousness. It's to let other people find their way to Krishna as we even continue to find our way back home to Godhead. So thank you for a wonderful class, but let's just keep our hearts and our minds open, to all.
Thank you so much, Mataji. You're absolutely right. I am crude and inexperienced with the culture of tithing, and so I did not comment as sensitively as I should, but I appreciate you recognize the origin, of course, that it is wonderful to be able to sacrifice for the benefit of the church or the temple and for others. And if it's done in love of God, then it's certainly a very powerful spiritual experience. So thank you for reminding. I apologize that I'm not very experienced in tithing. I was too young when I was in the church. Hare Krishna. Okay, I guess the Guru Puja is supposed to start at some point, but Taraka Prabhu has his digital hand up. So I don't know if you want to comment one more thing before we.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to see the deities, but yeah, that was a great point. That we don't want to disparage other religious systems necessarily. Srila Prabhupada, in general, was very respectful, particularly of Christians, Jews, Muslims. He explained that they are all actually Vaishnavas. Sometimes describe them as a lower grade of Vaishnavas, but they're also Vaishnavas and have to be respected as such. In this purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about abandoning the stereotype ritualistic ceremonies that go under the garb of so many religions. But in his typical practice of preaching to clergy and members of other religious systems, he would never say something like that. He would always encourage them in their own religious system, but to follow strictly, to refine their practice and to follow strictly. He never tried to encourage them to abandon their religious system and become Hare Krishna devotee or something like that. He always encouraged them in their own system. That was his pretty strict policy that he had in that regard. So yeah, it's important that we respect others because they are Vaishnavas, actually, and we don't want to commit Vaishnava aparad. And most people are pretty well set in their particular faith, and it would be fruitless to try to divert them, but we can encourage them to do what you're doing, but try to do it better. So Srila Prabhupada, in preaching to Christians, for example, would encourage them to try to understand what is the goal of religion, to love God, and that they could do better by refraining from eating meat, slaughtering animals, that thou shall not kill, Srila Prabhupada would insist, includes the animals. That was usually the tack that he would take in preaching to Christians. Do what you do, but stop killing the animals, please. Anyway, that's all I have. Hare
Thank you, Taraka Prabhu. Yes, Let's try to see the wonderful devotional qualities in all people, but at least for ourselves, we should also apply critical analysis of what is beneficial to pure devotion and what is not. And I think that's what we need to learn from Srila Prabhupada's purports from his books here. Hare Krishna. So I suppose we'll finish there. Thank you everyone for being present with your ears and with your soul. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Itago Premanandi. Hari Hari Bo. Oh, there we go. Srila Prabhupada is here. You want to sing?
Haribo, you never fail to give a class that inspires and enlivens. Yasodev Prabhu.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
If you don't sing, then I'm gonna also. Please sing. It's fine.
Even I know the arti, but still like wait for it. Shall I start? Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevalavantati Sana Bandhu Mohi Savadana Mate
Bandhu Savadana
Chahara Prasadevan Sitabatoriya Jai Krishna Prati Vojaha Oite
Krishna Bhakti
Shri Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittite Koriya Aikya Arana Muro Koi Asha Shri Guru Charane Rati Kise Uttamagati Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha Chiksudan Dilo Jai Janm Janme Prabhu Se Divya Gnan Hriday Prakashito Prema Bhakti Javote Avidya Vinasa Jate Vede Gai Jamana Charito Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Agama Janara Bandhu Lokanath Lokera Jivana Mahaprabhu Korodaya Devo Moe Padachaya Kevirai Vishti Bhavana Prabhupada Potita Pavana Gurudev Loila Shekana
Shri Guru
Jaya Gurudeva.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya
Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Gurudeva, 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 Jaya Gurudeva. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol,
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Dua apa dia?
Vishwanath Kinkai. Jai Radha Damodara Radha Shri Hare. Namam Vishwaram Satchitanandrupam Yasodev